Tonight we're going to take up the lower arm and the hand, though we've already touched on the lower arm. But we'll first do the hand, because when you understand how the hand moves, then you understand the masses up here. In other words, function makes form. First of all, the most important thing in the hand for an artist would be the shape of the bones. The hand is hard like the head. The most important thing in the head for an artist is the shape of the skull. Anything hard, you have to know the shape of the bones. So we'll try to learn the shapes of the bones. Then we'll learn the short muscles on the hand. You have, for instance, a muscle that spirals around here and goes to the little finger. When you pull on it, pulls out the little finger, abducts, as the artist says, or the doctor, I mean. Another one here, very important, egg-like shape, pulls out the index finger, and others. Then finally we'll take up the muscles of the arm down here that go into strings, you see, or tendons. And there's a big group. We put them together by groups. A big group comes off here and sends tendons in here. If you pull on the muscles, they flex the hand, or if you get the right one, it'll flex your fingers, you see. The same is true of the back. These things come off the condyles. If you pull on the group, it'll extend the hand. You can get a hold of the right muscle, it will extend the fingers. Then there are a few little fellows that come down the arm and extend the thumb like that. Frankly, abduct it, they would say. So let's try to get a feel of the shapes of the bones of the hands. Remember, our problem in illusionary drawing is very greatly trying to think of the shape before we draw it, having some conception of the shape of everything we draw. Of course, we can't do that unless we know the shape exists, you see. And that's where the layman suffers terribly when he starts to draw, because, of course, he only knows a few popular bumps on the body, you can see. Well, we might start drawing on this radius. Let's do the right hand. And we'll come down the radius and it opens up and proceeds to create a articulation that will hold the hand. For the artist, the ulna, the other bone, is really has very little to do with the hand. Now, we're drawing the palm side. It's sort of a hand. So I've got it right. I haven't. No, I got it wrong. I'm drawing the left hand. Well, see, the radius is here. We come down the radius here. On this side. We might make it bigger anyway, it'll be clearer. And there's the cavity that holds the hand. And next to it is the ulna. There's that nice bump on the end that I think you're all familiar with. And you see it touches the radius. There's an articulation there. Now, when we look at the hand, we find it's made up of the carpus, which is this group of bones here. The bones beyond the carpus, which are called the metacarpal bones. And remember, this is the metacarpal of the thumb. And finally, the phalanges. There are only two on the thumb, just like the big toe. One could think of all kinds of mass conceptions for the hand. There's a nice one, but it applies to the closed hand. You know your hand gets much wider when you spread your fingers. You see, your hand isn't much wider than two eyes when it's that way, but the minute you spread your fingers, it takes on about, almost half an eye more. People are very surprised by the fact that the hand is so small across here. There's a famous measurement of the hand among art students. That is, it reaches from the chin to the widow's peak. Well, that's supposed to be 6 eyes, but then another famous idea among art students is that your fist will reach from your nose to your chin. Well, that would be 2 eyes, you see. Well, of course, we all vary a touch, but those are the reasonable averages. So we could put a carpus in here. We'd have to make it quite shallow. And notice I'm drawing the hand in the way it normally falls in this position. You see how your angles break just normally there? You see, a beginner would make the whole arm straight. But a professional is very aware of how the arm comes down here, then goes out, and then the hand goes back. It's that old rule in figure drawing. As you move from form to form, you change direction, you see. Now, we can't split this thing with a line. It should be in the middle. That probably wouldn't come out so far. It should be in the middle. And the nice thing about that is that the metacarpal of the little finger, metacarpal of the little finger, which is firmly attached to the carpus, will run along that line. And all these metacarpals and metatarsals, the basic shape, and we have to have shape conceptions, would be a box and a rod and a ball. Then you refine that for years, perhaps. And then another thing is that if you double the carpus, you get to the end of the middle finger. That means that's about an eye long, you see. And we get our box and our rod. And finally the ball, which is very much on the palm side of the hand. The index finger is also stuck to the carpus. And you find you can't move it without moving the carpus. But these other two are very different. The third is quite flexible here, a touch shorter. And the little finger is famous because a big bump on the end like that of the little toe. Now I'm spreading this hand slightly. And there's a great trick in spreading hands and spreading fingers. You take a point just here, and then you see, if you spread your fingers, you take straight lines and run them this way, and they'll hit the end of each finger if the hand is firmly spread. Guess you get the point by experimentation. I have it from childhood, because when I was in the 6th grade or something, some terrible little boy took a fountain pen and jabbed it into my hand and made a tattoo mark there that has conveniently lasted me all my life. It seems to be just in the right place. But you can find out where it is. It's an amusing line if you can think of it as a pin going right through the hand. Because you can take points on the pin and still do the same thing for the spray. I mean, a point here on the pin. If the fingers are down, you got the right direction. In other words, you'll see me now, I'm spreading my hand. The point is about here, you see. The fingers will go along these lines. The thumb will do the same. Well, the body of the hand is supposed to be the same length as the index finger. See, if I measure the body of my hand and then the index finger, they seem to be about the same. Now, that's a fairly normal idea. So we know that the end of the index finger should be about here. And each one of these bones is about 3/4 the length of the one before. Although it's not quite true on the last two. They're a little more equal. And the last phalange has the arrowhead that both the fingers and the toes have that support the nails, you know, on the other side. The index is a touch shorter. You know, artists get this feeling of curves here. I don't know there are any real rules about it. That's a little low, I think. But the index is just a touch shorter. And then these two are allowed to be very much the same size at the end of the hand, you see. So I could be pretty sure that taking that as my width line, the other one will end about here. We'll talk much more about these little phalanges when we get to the bones themselves, the fingers. Now the metacarpal of the thumb, of course, comes off the carpus in its own peculiar way we'll talk about. And I don't know, the artist has a great feeling that this joint here is about equal to this one here. He likes to draw a circle there, you see. This one here and this one here. And so you get your second phalange about here. First phalange and the second with the arrowhead. This carpus is full of bones and takes a lot of study if you want to get it very exactly. But most artists just think of it as a quarter of an apple with the skin side on the back. Even Raphael seems to do that. There are little details I'll try to point out that we can learn, especially perhaps on the palm side. Well, we have to, I don't know that I have to run over those terms again. That's the radius, the ulna, the carpus, the metacarpal bones, and the phalanges, or fingers we call them. We have to think about the fact that we all came from the sea, and that our tears are salt, and our sweat is salt, and we have webbed hands and webbed feet like sea animals. And it comes as a surprise to people to know the webbing comes way down these fingers, halfway down. You see, people often draw as if the fingers started here, but they don't because of the webbing. That causes quite a little confusion in the beginning, because you think the body of the hand is that long, you know, because you see the webbing there. But actually, you see, when you close your fist, you find that you've made a mistake. You have to realize that all of this in here is finger, actually, because of that webbing, which we get from the sea. The webbing on this joint runs from here to there. Let's take a back view, because in the back view we'll have to think a little more about the bones, because if you feel the back of your hand, they're coming right through the skin. And you almost draw them when you draw the back of the hand. So we can come down on a radius. Open it out. And put the ulna next to it. And now we will take in a little detail, a little styloid process on the back of this prominent bump we feel here. You see, the end of the ulnar always shows as a bump at the end of the arm. The carpus sits in here like a quarter of an apple, the flesh side. Probably about an eye long that way. And if we can get the center line or on the back and double the carpus, we'll know about where that middle finger metacarpal starts. So we, notice that I put the bone over to the right of this line. Now that we're on the back of the hand, the ball is not at all prominent. It's underneath. It's underneath there. Here's the metacarpal of the index, which is mortised, as they like to say, to the hand. That means securely fastened. You see, that's the back we're doing. And I drew this metacarpal, and I drew that one, and the carpus. That's all one solid piece. That's why some people say the hand is something like a bird. This is the body. But we can move the wings on each side, you see. You see, there's a lot of movement in this metacarpal here up against the carpus, and a lot here. If we spread the hands, the spreading is all done through these metacarpals. People like to say that the hand is so flat you can sort of hold the horizon of the earth, but it's so curved that it can hold an egg. And the reason is just the movement of those metacarpals in there. We have to think of that in relation to the foot too, because the same thing goes on. So here's the metacarpal of the fourth, or ring finger, they call it enthusiastically, maybe hopefully. The ball very much on the bottom, and then the metacarpal of the little finger with a big bump there. That's one of our landmarks. It's shorter still. And the thumb comes out of here, metacarpal of the thumb. Again, we can take this same point, you see, and spread the hand. I'm drawing it as if it was spread. Just so you won't get mixed up, this is the palm. There's the back. Right away we can get the length of the middle finger. It'll be twice the body of the hand. You see, this is what they call the body of the hand. Artists are very conscious of it. Carpus and metacarpus. They make a mass of it always when they draw in their minds. The first joint, as I say, about 2/3 the previous. A little more equal on the end there. The index. You see, this is the real width line of the hand, the way that is. And we can use that width line and get an idea where the next finger will come. The little finger, oh, some people say it's about as long as the metacarpal. In other words, that and that is supposed to be about equal. I don't know how true that is. I've heard it said. Let's try it out on the skeleton. Doesn't look true at all here. I don't think that's a very good rule. Well, again, of course, we have the webbing on the back. Oh, we got to put a few bones on here. A little arrowhead. The webbing naturally is way down the fingers, you see. It runs from that joint to that joint. And help makes the skeleton look like a hand. Now, on the back of the hand, there are very curious little lines on the bones that artists study. There are little curved lines that run like this on the back of each bone. And the thing about them is the space between them is flat. On the metacarpal of the index here, the bone has a little spiral quality. That's a very famous line, that one is. The reason is that when you mass up the body of the hand, that line is the real edge. That's the edge where the major light planes meet. And to find an anatomical line where the major light planes meet is very rare on this human body. The line where major light planes meet usually exists in the artist's imagination. And that's why primitives and beginners can never draw it. This line here is often thought of as one. The line in the angle of the ribs is one. But they're very hard to find. But there are little subtle ones, like these two lines here, that one and that one, which are very evidently the edge of the body of the hand. That is, if I light this with two lights and throw a great light from here, it won't be able to get beyond that line, you see, and light up the other side. One of the great mistakes, it's awfully hard to explain, one of the great mistakes beginners made is not to realize that artists break their planes with their mind, not with their eyes. And beginners are always breaking their planes on very peculiar places. They're major planes like the edge of rectus abdominis. They'll say all of that is front plane and the rest is side, and things of that sort, but it just won't work. It has to be an intellectual process, this breaking of form into two planes with two lights that are created by the artist. The knife edge of the tibia is one of these breaks where the major plane often meet. Tendon of tibialis anticus they often meet on. But very seldom do they meet on an anatomical line. Well, there are your hands. I think you know what the movement is. You can abduct it or adduct it and flex it, extend it, but you can't rotate it. You see, if you hold the radius, you can't rotate your hand. The rotation is done, as we said last time, in this peculiar way of the radius carrying the hand over the ulna. You see, the radius is a rotating bone, and it rotates over the ulna. This ulna here can be in any position, but the radius can still do its stuff, you see. Well, of course, there have to be muscles to do that. And they, of course, make up a lot of the form of the lower arm. But what we're going into are the short muscles first that have such an influence on the hand itself. Well, I was talking about one that pulled out the little finger, but I think maybe before we do that, we might draw some other views of the hand so we can get a better idea of the feel of the bones. Let's draw this view of the right hand. we'll find that we can put the body now very conveniently in 3 cubes. All about an eye's height, width, and length. And the carpus, which is really a quarter of an apple, doesn't quite come to the bottom of that cube. The metacarpal of the middle finger has a slight rise to the top, you see. And the ball is on the bottom. And the metacarpal of the next is very much the same, except it doesn't quite come down so far. It's a box, a rod, and a ball in your original invention. Now, what is very hard to get is the amount of rotation on that thumb. How does it come out of the hand? I think the solution is to study this joint. This, again, is a ball and saddle joint. And that's something like a saddle on a spool. The saddle is on the thumb end. And if you can get the position of the spool, then you can get the rotation of that joint. And the spool here, the spool is about here. It comes out of the bone there, and is in more or less that position, you see. And the saddle has to bite it, so the thumb comes off about that way. Well, just place that spool in your mind, and then you can feel the amount of rotation on that difficult thumb. You see, it's looking this way. It isn't looking this way or anything like that. Now, I find the books say there's no actual rotation in the thumb, but it's a lie. Certainly, if I do that, my thumb is looking this way. If I do that, it is looking that way. It may have to do with the looseness of the joint, but there is a certain amount of rotation in that thumb for the fastidious. I don't think it makes much difference. Well, I suppose we'd see underneath there. I don't know that we could. I don't believe we could, no. We'd see the bones now coming off. And they, too, you see, they have a bump and a rise, and another bump, and a bump, a rise, and another bump. And the last one goes up a little. What's the great mistake is draw them this way. You know, people do that very gaily, concave to the top on the straight profile. The strange thing is, on the 3/4, they are concave, but not on the profile. You have to remember that the top of the finger is really bone, and the top of the hand is very much bone. I forgot to say on the back of the hand that these lines I drew here, they enclose a flat space. So the back of the hand is very flat. I think the reason for that is that everybody thinks these tendons here are ropes or strings, but actually they're rather tape-like. And if you look at them carefully, they move very easily across the back of the hand, and it would have to be flat for them to do that. Well, there'd be a middle finger here, which would be just a touch longer. But I think the secret of all this is to remember that those bones are a bump and a concave to the convex to the top, and then a bump and a convex to the top. Unless you get over to the 3/4 view, the thing to do is look at them at the skeleton and see what happens to them, because the finger takes on their character enormously on the outline. Well, let's try this view. Again, we can box up the body nicely. About 3 cubes would do it. And the carpus will come about to there. And now we'll see the middle finger, it'll rise the other end. And the next finger coming down slightly. And then the next one with big bump like the little toe, probably about to there. And we can take these fingers off. Now, of course, on this side, you see the radius. Radius moves up, you see, and turns into a sort of a lozenge shape here and holds that hand. You might see the ulna behind, but not very much of it. The curious thing about this hand is that this is the carpus here, as it is there. But if I do this, this is the carpus here. In other words, the arrangement seems to be something like this, that if I throw the hand down a bit, we get the carpus there, you see. But if, on the other hand, I decide I'll throw the hand way up, we can almost think of the body as egg-like. And we'll feel the influence of the carpus there. You see, there it is, big bump. Of course, another saddle joint you're dealing with, of a sort. Well, now I think we might put in a few short muscles. There are very few we art students have to learn. There is, for instance, the one I said, pull the little finger out. On this front view here, it rises about here and spirals around the bone and goes into the side of the little finger so that it can abduct it, they would say. You see, abduction, they think of the hand as a unit, so that would be abduction, and that would be an abduction of the thumb. Well, the thing to do is trace that muscle through on the other views and see its influence. And trace them all, as a matter of fact. Here, this is the back view, you see. It'll stick out here a little. Not much. The abductor of the little finger. Of course, on this inner view, here's our carpus here, it will have an enormous influence. It'll be all that. It'll go up to that line we were talking about. Well, the abductor of the index really makes a skeleton look like a hand. It's, among artists, a very famous egg-shaped mass. And it lies in here. Let's get to the back side. It lies in here. It's a muscle like that. It runs right up against the line we're talking of. It has an attachment to the thumb that doesn't seem to have much influence on the thumb. And the little tendon goes into the side of the index there, and of course pulls it out like that. That's the abductor of the index. Some of your books will call it one of the interossi, but I think that's much better for art students to think of it as the abductor of the index. On the palm side, we can't see it. But you know, there are similar muscles like these in between these spaces here that art students don't study because they're deep and they don't seem to affect the form. But you can see what they do. They're the ones that enable you to move your finger backward and forth like that, you see. And they fill up the space between the bones, and they're called the interossi. And it's evident that this one and that one are just part of that group, really. Now, we have here a very peculiar muscle, it's very deep, that runs from the, this is the palm, remember, runs from the metatarsal of the metacarpal of the thumb right across, very deep, to the middle bone there. And what it does is to pull the thumb that way. Well, now, wrinkles form across the pull of muscles. And that one is particularly famous because that creates your lifeline, you see. That's why you have a lifeline, on account of that muscle. Well, as a matter of fact, I was going to say that you could always combine the study of the hand with fortune telling, you know. We artists use the same lines they do. And then you'll always have a little career on the side, you know, to keep you in paints and canvas. Well, you look at your lifeline carefully, and where is it? It's about like this. I think it goes up to the outside of that bone there. Now, incidentally, there is a landmark here. We call it the head of the scaphoid. And I think you could feel it, but artists are very aware of it. And the lifeline likes to start on that and moves around like this, you see. It'll tell you how old you are if you take a point about here, you see. That would be about 50. But that's about 25, that's 75, and that's about 100. So just one glance, you can tell how long you're going to live, you see. There's a wonderful story written by Max Beerbohm, the Englishman, about a group of people were in a train, and there was a fortune teller in the train. And he began to tell everybody's fortunes. And he saw that they were all going to die on the same day. And he thought, well, there's no way that could happen unless this train is going to be wrecked and everybody killed. But he said, I'm not going to take part in that. So he pulled the emergency cord, train stopped, and he got cut off, you see. And then the train went on, it was a terrible wreck, and everybody was killed. There you are, you see. So it pays to study these things, you know. There's a very curious muscle here, and anatomists really don't know why it's there. Little fibers run this way, but it's called the short muscle of the palm. It's more or less embedded in the skin. And there are lots of theories about it. One is it helped primitive man to cup his hand when he wanted to drink water and things like that, but it's found on very few animals. But for us, it makes a big bump, you see there. In other words, when we think of the body of the hand, and you know this is it, we think of a either squared up form, or I think perhaps more often a form like that. And we find, you see, there's a bump on each corner. There's a great bump there. Frankly, there's a bump here too. But it comes from the actual bulging of the bone there. There's a bump here too. But it comes from the bulging of that bone. Fortune tellers call this business leadership. That bump there is very large. I can't think of any reason except if you worry so much about your business, you get a little arthritis. It gets a little larger, but that might be the reason. There is a muscle that starts there. As a matter of fact, it's a group of three. And they run up to this joint and bend it, you see. I think it overtakes the outline a little bit on this view. It runs up to that joint and bends it. It's a group of three muscles. And they'd be, in the books, pretty much the abductor of the first phalange. But the fortune tellers call that the mound of love. You see, if you have that strongly developed, you're very attractive to the opposite sex. There's no doubt about it. Except if you think your way around it, if you just exercise it a little, you see. We get larger, 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 and it might not change your position in your particular world. Maybe thumbing cows, milking cows would improve that. There are very, you ought to look at it a good deal. When you bend it, you get very interesting wrinkles across here that are used by artists. So you see on the body of the hand, we more or less feel 1, 2, 3, 4 bumps that are quite clear. Now, as I say, these muscles can all be transferred from these diagrams to the other ones. If I take this here, you see, not only do you become familiar perhaps with the bump of the scaphoid. Oh no, that's the wrong side. Where am I? Oh no, it's not the wrong side. No, that's another one. Another landmark here. That's the most famous, I think. A little further out, perhaps. That's what they call the pisiform bone, or the pea-like bone. And it has good reasons for being a landmark. The main one is that this tendon goes directly for it. And it would come down here a bit, you see, and we feel this bump starting right off from it, you see. Sure, if you look at your hand, you get those 2 clear bumps there. And this one, too. We'll start off there. On the thumb side, we think of the scaphoid. And since this muscle has a tendency to come from there, you see, that's why you get that fullness there. Similarly, we can take this muscle and fill up the space here, you see, with that nice egg-shaped muscle. That's the abductor of the index. Well, I do believe those are the short muscles as art students are taught them. And I think we ought to have a little recess, and then we come back and attack the long ones and their tendons. Well, now let's move up to the lower arm. And see what goes on up there. We do the right arm, and we come down on this humerus. And now I think we know what's underneath the humerus. A spool and a ball. And the ulna, you see, bites the spool to get a nice hinge joint. And the ulna has a beautiful little S-curve and comes down about like that with that big knob at the end. This is the front side we're doing, a palm side. And the ulna starts off large and then ends up quite small. The radius is just pushed up against that ball, as if my stick were hollowed out here, and it's nothing more or less than a rotating bone. The ulna performs its hinge action, that's this one, but no matter where this ulna is, the radius can rotate around and carry the hand, you see, like that. As you get on, you're able to visualize those bones in the arm in any position in the lower arm. I think most of you know this is called supination, and this is called pronation. Supination. And all medical students, as I said, all art students say you can hold a bowl of soup that way, but you can't hold it that way, so that's supination. Now, the body of the hand is down here. Oh, I haven't drawn the radius yet. The radius is just pushed up against that ball, and it starts small, but of course the end's quite large, and it has a place for holding the hand, you see. Now we know how long the hand will be, because it'll be 1/5 off the length of the ulna. We know that halfway down the hand will be the end of the body of the hand, as we call it, carpus, the metacarpus. So we could, no, I don't think I've quite hit it, have I? Not at all, about here. So we could fit that sort of a shape in there. We could say the carpus would be about so much. And you see, we're doing this. And we could get our little point and get the feel of the fingers for a spread hand. We could feel the thumb of some sort and finger or so. And that, of course, would be the palm. Now, we have to flex the hand, as they say. And we have to close the fingers. And there's a whole group of muscles we call the flexors that come off the interior condyle, which is this thing here. Very famous landmark, this thing here, you see. And they belly out on a man about halfway down the arm. And they form the flexor group. As I said last time, the way to go after this is function. People go crazy trying to learn these muscles. As soon as you figure out what they do, it's not hard. Because anything that flexes is always called flexor something, you know, flexor carpi ulnaris or something like that. Now, well, let's take up flexor carpi ulnaris. It's in this mass here, but the artist hardly distinguishes it from the other. But he's very aware of the tendon that comes down and goes into our landmark, you see, which is the pisiform bone. That's one of the great lines in the business, because that, of course, is this sharp edge here. And that, of course, is an anatomical line where the major light planes meet, you see, again. And there aren't many of them, I show you. That's called the flexure of the carpus on the side of the ulna, flexor carpi ulnaris, they say. Because nowadays, in their last meeting, the anatomists decided they'd make every anatomical term a Latin term, every one of them. But we art students, we lag behind a bit. On the other side is another flexor buried in there, and that heads towards the scaphoid bump, and that's very famous among doctors, that one. That's flexor carpi radialis. The reason it's famous among doctors is that if you can get your finger on it, you can come down, you see, and then when you get to the bone, you can press, and your pulse is right there. And if you're alive, you can feel your pulse. Oh, yes, there it goes. That's all right. But you see, you've always noticed a doctor will come down like that, and he's running down flexor carpi radialis. Now, in the center is one, we might say for a moment, that comes down, enters the flesh of the hand, and goes to the ends of all the fingers. But the strange thing is, in the human being, there are two of those. And what they do is go to the ends of the fingers, and if you pull on the two, they'll close your fingers, you see. Now, again, there's a piece of sort of phony scientific theory about that. It was thought that little monkeys if they fell out of their nests, that would be the end, you see. So gradually they developed two common flexes of the fingers instead of one. So if they fell out of the nest, they could hold on to a twig or a limb, you see. And you'll find to this day that if you have a newborn baby and you want to hang him on the chandelier, he'll hang there, because he's got two common flexes of the fingers, you see. Babies have very strong grips, as some of you mothers know. But oddly enough, that's not the muscle we use when we draw the center of the hand. If you put your fingers together like this, you see a very strong tendon that seems to escape the binding of the flesh, the binding of the wrist. And that is called the long muscle of the palm. And that lies over the two I've just described. And again, the tendon is the thing we're after, the tendon. Now, to transfer some of these thoughts over here, I put in this one, which is very obvious and well known, makes the corner. This one here, I think you can see that function from the drawings. You know, they can do this and this and this. And the one in the center that you can't really, the two in the center you can't really see, they come down and then they divide and they go to the ends of all the fingers, you see. Those are the common flexes of the fingers. Right down the center, the very end. That's the reason you can close your fingers. But the one the artist draws is one that's quite near this one, which overshadows those others. And all it does is just spread in the flesh of the palm. And it's called palmaris longus. You see that little baby in there I was talking about? That's palmaris brevis, or the short one. Now, these muscles on men, they come about halfway down, because men are short muscle. On women, they're liable to come a little further down, which makes the women more graceful. You see, I've told you, I think, that we're all divided between long-muscled and short-muscled people, and variations in between. Now, if we go to the back of the hand, the inner condyle will be here. That's that, you see. The inner condyle will be here. And the outer there. And we get this arrangement. The little spool will be here, a crazy spool that goes uphill on the bottom, you see. And that gives the ulnar its particular direction. The ulnar has a big bump on the end. This one's a little smaller than the other. The radius is pushed up against the ball, you can still see from the back. And it comes down and opens out to make the articulation, as we say. Well, just to differentiate, we might draw sort of a fist here, I guess. A thumb coming off here. Now, this flexor group, of course you can see from the back. You see, you're very aware that it comes off the inner condyle. And of course you'd see it from the back here, bulging out just a little, and going to the front, and embracing the bone. Embracing the bone. The flexor group look about like that. But dominating the back of the arm is the extensor group. And it's very much the same idea. It's a group of muscles. You see, it swells out like that. It embraces the bone quite a little. And it has in it muscles are very much the same type. It has a flexor on the side of the radius that sends a tendon down that goes in the hand there. Then a flexor on the side of the ulna comes down there. And between the two of them, oh, they'd be extensors, I'm so sorry. Extensors, of course. They can do that sort of thing. To put them on the big pictures, this, of course, is flexor carpi ulnaris. If you're taking a ride over that styloid process, it really goes all the way up into that bone there. And for pretty good reason, too. You see, it would come up along here, and it would have to go in about there, otherwise it couldn't pull the hand into that position, which is what it has to do. Extensor. The other one comes down and goes into perhaps a process we ought to remember, a little bump on the back of the middle metacarpal. It shows up a good deal. Well, the rest is about what you'd expect. There's another one in the middle, the common extensor of the fingers, and that comes down and it goes to the ends of all the fingers in the center there. In this diagram, there's only one on this side. It's quite a heavy tendon there that branches out about here, and about here divides and goes all the way down the ends of the fingers. But as an artist, you never see it go beyond halfway down the first phalange. Of course, those tendons are used a lot by artists. You know, if you put your hand above your elbow, the veins go away. And you can see them here, you see. But you never see them much beyond here, even though they go all the way down to the bottom. And those are the common flexors of the fingers. Now, we have one more group that artists call the supinator group. The supinator group. And it's loosely named, I think, and it consists of two muscles. And it's very important in drawing, however. You see it on the front view. Of course, on the front view, we'd see this one here, you see, hiding behind the bone. I better put on these what these are. That's the flexor, you see, the flexor group. And that's the flexor there. But this is the extensor group. Perhaps I can color the extensors green. You see, this is the back view. This is palm or front view. Of course, there's a furrow in here. It's quite famous. That's the ulnar furrow in between the two groups. Now this great supinator goes way up the arm here. And it's a group of two muscles, and it pretty much covers the green group. And the principal muscle sends a tendon in that goes in about there. You see, the reason it's called supinator, I'd have to see if I can get a back view in here for you, or at least get the arm into pronation. We'll draw this same view here.
And we can remember all the same things. The ulna will remain the same, you see. But the radius, you see, the radius can revolve over the ulna. It doesn't do it very fully on this badly put together skeleton, much better on you. The radius, you see, can revolve all the way over the ulna. So that radius can do this. Revolve right over the ulna, like that. And of course, we now see the back of a hand here. In other words, I go from this to that. Yeah, that's right, you see. Now, we have on here the little flexor group and the deep extensor group, and then the great supinator group over this. Now, you see it's been forced into a spiral. It principally goes into there. It's been forced into a spiral. And in order to uncoil that spiral, you see, it gives the supination movement to the arm, and that's why I just call that the supinator group. Frankly, in this picture, you see it starts way up here, way up on the bone, and would swell out a good deal. That's supinator. Watch for that line there. That's the line between the functions, you see. And one of these comes down, goes into here, and another one actually comes down and goes into the index. In other words, it's called the flexor of the carpus, flexor carpi radialis, brevis, they call it. Goes in there. So with those three groups, you can do about anything you want with your hands, you see. You move all your fingers, rotate it. And I would advise you, if you haven't studied much anatomy, not all the books tell you to put these things together in terms of function. But it's very wise to do, and I think that what you ought to do if you haven't studied much anatomy and you get to the really brutal problems of the lower arm is to take 3 different colored crayons, and anything that's called extensor, color it one color, and anything called flexor, color it another, and then you'll have the supinator group left over. And then you can get it clearly in your mind. It's not as complicated as it seems if you break them into functional groups. On the back of this arm, there's a little more subtlety going on. There are some muscles that move the thumb. Their bellies are not very obvious. There are 3 of them. Like that. And they're put in underneath there, and the tendon of this one comes down and goes to the base of the thumb. The real importance of that thing is that if I drew this anatomy very carefully, it would be very jagged. You see, I'd get the little scaphoid and the trapezium or trapezoid, whatever they call it. I get something like that. But if you look at your hand, you'll see this beautiful free sweep there. And that's the tendon of this one that's buried in there. I guess it would be called the abductor of the first phalange. It is accompanied by the second one that just follows it, except that goes in to here. And if you look at your hand carefully and move it up and down, you'll see the 2. You can see the 2 at times. But I think most artists consider them as one, because they look a lot like one. Now there's one more that goes to the end of the thumb here. There's one more that goes to the end of the thumb, and it comes down and it goes across here in a very crazy way in the very last phalange. And if you do something like this, you'll see that great hollow between those tendons, between the two here and the one there. That's called a snuff box, because in the old days they put a little snuff there, you know, and slip it and get a high. Nothing but a nicotine high, actually, but and they still do, you know, they still use snuff in places where fire is in fireworks factories. Strange enough, the U.S. Senate, there is a snuff box about, just for old time's sake, I guess. Now, on these flexors, we have to think of what they do to these lines across the hand. Of course, we always get wrinkles running across the pull of muscles. And you see on this front view here, the common flexor comes down underneath there and goes to the ends of all the fingers. That's going to cause lines to go across there. And we learn those lines by heart because, you know, any line of a form will tell people what direction the form is going and what shape it is, you see. Usually you can't see them because the model holds a fistful of shadow, you know, so you have to learn them by heart. The first line the first line, this flexor group creates is that one, which is called the headline by the fortune tellers. The next one is called the heart line. Runs a good deal like that. You see, those are flexor lines and caused by the pull of the muscles. The next ones have to do with these pads on the joints. The curious thing is the pads don't fall where you think they ought to. For instance, you get a break there, you know, and a break there. You see on the side view, this bump goes all the way up to the webbing. You see, like that. It doesn't seem as it ought to, but it does. The next break is pretty much under the joint. The next break's a little before the joint, they like to say. But artists study their own hands to see where those things lie. There's a very curious thing about wrinkles on that, you always get two wrinkles here on the palm side. And as I remember, a couple here as well. But you can see how functionally those wrinkles develop because of the flexor muscles. Of course, there are other famous wrinkles in fortune telling and anatomy. On account of these muscles here, you get wrinkles across there. They're called the bracelets. And the fortune tellers, heaven knows, I don't know, they say how many times you're going to get married, but there are always 3. Well, that's all right in the Greek Orthodox Church, but it all depends, you know. The Greeks are very sensible. They say you can get married twice, but the third time you have to stay married, because by that time you ought to know enough not to be foolish anymore. You see. But they really, you know, scientifically, just functional breaks, wrinkles across the pull of muscles, like these things here. The problem of the actual draftsmanship of the hand, the drawing of the hand, your real problem is the problem of the direction. You see, you have to decide on the direction of the body of the hand, of the wrist,
and of each one of the phalanges. That's something like 17 directions in all, you know. And it's your responsibility to decide on them, not make them look as they're going two ways at once, you see, any one of these directions. And that, of course, is why artists are always massing things up. You see, if I mass up my wrist like that, I know what direction it's going because of all our mass conceptions. Blocks will give you the best direction. Let's take a horrible hand. I thought of one like this, you know. And just figure it out. What direction is the body of the hand going, you see? Matter of fact, I think that way I'd have to mass it that way. Well, it's an abduction a bit. It must be a sort of a vague mass like this. In our minds, you see. You see, we're getting direction. This finger, we can think of it as a block or cylinder, if we wish, going off this way. Artists love to run rings around an ideal cylinder to get those wrinkles, you know. This finger here is going three directions at once. And we'd have to stop and analyze each direction, you see. And combine them all together. Something like that, I think. You know, we have to feel that, and that. And I suppose this line in here would be a sort of a compromise between that and that. And this line here we'd hardly see. The thumb, you know, runs from its point of origin here up to the other finger. We can just think of it as some sort of a simple mass, like that. But we ought to know its direction. We could either box it or put circles around it. You see, putting circles around things gives them directions, gives them axis direction, you might say. Here's another finger. Well, if we think of it simply, we can just think, well, it's about like that. And here's another coming almost at us. That's the sort of mass layout you should have in your mind for direction. It's very hard to get direction without thinking some sort of mass. The rectangular form is always considered the best, but cylinders have their values, especially for tilt, you know, or thrust as we call it. Now, the rest of the drawing is entirely, it seems to me, memory work. It's studying your hand. It's putting in the details we've been talking about. You see, you probably know that on the 3/4 that you're seeing the bone there. And maybe this thing would start to show up, you see. And you can go so far as to study these bones a great deal in here. And perhaps you'd catch this tendon running over there. The minute I run these lines over there, you see, they'll tell you about the direction of the form. They'll tell you how things are going. And if you didn't know the way the body of the form was going, you couldn't run those lines. These landmarks here, all artists know those. You see, that one will come there. That's the pisiform bone. There's the flexor. The thumb has its individuality, I suppose, but you know a good deal about it. And we now know that we have this big mound here, and we know that in this position it has these very startling wrinkles over it that are all going this way, you see. Palmaris brevis we always feel down here as a kind of a lonely thing, you know. The lifeline is in there. And it's just memory, I'm afraid, from now on. Of course, at the risk, there's no doubt we'd probably talk about that one, which is this one.
Undoubtedly about this. And then about the long muscle of the palm, you see, that's the one that takes the outline there. Never quite in the middle, a little towards the pisiform bone. And as you study them, they get easier, especially if you mass them up a bit, you know, and feel their direction. I think one of the most startling examples of mass is that little thing I may have done in the beginning. I can draw a finger like this. But I have to know which way it's going, don't you see? And if I haven't been taught to square up as an artist, and the minute I square up, of course, I put it in blocks, and then I can tell which way it's going, you see. Especially if I put a nail there. And I can take just the same old thing, and I can square up this way. And then where would I be? Underneath the finger, you see. You see, this one is that, this one is that. And that's why you find instructors are always telling you to square up, for one of the reasons. The other is to remind you of the two major planes. But you have to learn to do the whole body, and it seems to me the only time you can do it is in the art schools, you know, because those are construction lines. And you don't want to mess your drawings up with them after you grow up, you see. So get them so they're second nature, this squaring up. Of course, they're directly related to perspective as well, you know. Well, as I say, here I go talking about techniques, but we have to remember that there are many other things in art besides techniques. And somebody once said, "Mine eyes have missed the glory of the coming of the Lord. I was searching through my pockets where my visual aids were stored." You see, that shows you what techniques get you. We have to get these techniques so that they are subconscious and automatic and do not overwhelm us with their importance. Because as artists, we're not really deeply interested in them themselves. We're interested in other things, and it's very hard to say what these other things are. And people take a try. T.S. Eliot said you had to hear the mermaids singing if you were going to be an artist. And as some of you know, T.S. Eliot wrote a poem, T.S. Eliot, which went, "I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hairs of the waves blown back when the winds blow the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea with sea-girls wreathed in seaweed, red and brown. Then human voices wake us, and we drown." Thank you.